Everyone looked at her as if she were invisible, as if the broom in her hands was all she was, all she had ever been, and all she would ever be. But that night, the invisible woman decided to breathe like a ghost that refused to die. Her name was Helena. She was a black woman in her late 40s, with calloused hands that smelled of bleach and long hours of silence echoing inside her. The world knew her only as the one who scrubbed the marble floors of the corporate tower, the one who emptied trash bins filled with papers that held secrets worth millions. To them, she was just the shadow that passed through their empire of glass and steel, leaving no trace but the smell of disinfectant. Yet once, Helena had been more. Once, she had been a mind that could cut through chaos like a blade. Years ago, in another life, she had been a nurse in one of the best hospitals in the city. A woman of precision and compassion, with knowledge stored like fire inside her. But fire burns, and hers was consumed the day her little boy fell sick, and the system she served with devotion turned its back on him. The hospital had rules, forms, protocols. Her son needed urgent treatment, but she had neither the money nor the privilege to push the doors open. She begged, she cried, she offered her service for free, endless nights of work, just to buy him time. But bureaucracy moved slower than disease. By the time the papers were signed, her son's heart had stopped. And the very doctors she had served, the men she had respected, walked past her grief with eyes that avoided her face, as if sorrow were contagious. That was the day Helena left the white coat on the hospital bench and never looked back. She could not stand the sight of needles, charts, or the smell of disinfectant that wasn't meant to save, but to sterilize indifference. She became what the world pushed her to be, a cleaner of spaces, not of wounds, a woman nobody saw. For years, Helena swept hallways and polished mirrors, trying to erase her own reflection, yet the knowledge inside her never truly left. Anatomy, medicine, the rhythm of breath, and the fragility of veins. All of it was still there, buried beneath silence. She kept it like a secret, like a scar too deep to show. The tower she worked in belonged to men who believed themselves gods. One of them was Arthur Legrand, the CEO. He was the kind of man whose voice could silence a room, whose arrogance filled every corner, whose contempt for the small people was so natural it no longer even needed to be spoken. Helena had seen him countless nights, walking past her with his perfect suit and his perfect disdain. Sometimes he left the remains of his expensive meals on the table for her to clear, without ever looking at her. To him, she was less than the crumbs he discarded. But fate has a way of turning arrogance into weakness. And that night, the tower trembled with chaos. It began during a celebration. The company had just closed a $1 billion deal, and the entire upper floor was filled with laughter, glasses clinking, expensive wine flowing. Helena was there, as always, clearing glasses, sweeping discreetly, collecting napkins stained with lipstick and power. Invisible, silent, watching. Then the sound shifted. A glass fell, but not from drunken clumsiness. It shattered against the floor as Arthur Legrand clutched his chest, gasping for breath. His face turned pale, then purple. He fell, the titan collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut. At first, no one moved. The powerful are not supposed to fall. But then the panic erupted. Calls for help, voices shouting, men in suits running in circles. A few tried chest compressions, but their hands were clumsy, their knowledge non-existent. Someone dialed the emergency number, but the ambulance would take too long. Minutes, maybe 20, and Arthur had none. Helena stood at the edge of the room, broom still in her hand, watching the chaos unravel. She saw the way his body convulsed, the way his lips foamed. She knew it instantly. Cardiac arrest. A fatal rhythm, unless corrected now. And none of them knew how to correct it. Her heart pounded. She had buried this knowledge under years of silence, but it came rushing back with the force of memory, of pain, of her son's face on that hospital bed. She knew exactly what to do, but she was just the cleaning woman. Who would listen to her? Who would believe she held the key to his survival? She dropped the broom. The sound of it hitting the marble echoed louder than all the panic. She walked forward, her steps steady, her eyes burning. The crowd parted with disgust, some with confusion, as if offended that the woman who scrubbed their floors dared to step into their circle. "Move," she said. Her voice was low but cut like a knife. One of the executives turned, sneering. "Get back. This isn't your place." But Helena didn't stop. She knelt beside Arthur, pressing her ear close to his mouth, her fingers on his neck. No pulse. His eyes were rolling back. "He's in ventricular fibrillation," she muttered, more to herself than to them. "We need a defibrillator." Her hands moved with confidence. She tilted his head, cleared his airway, began compressions. The executives watched, horrified, torn between disbelief and desperation. "We need the AED." She shouted now, louder, commanding. Her voice broke through their arrogance, like thunder. One of them, trembling, ran to fetch the device from the wall. As she worked, memories bled into her. The rhythm of compressions echoed the rhythm she once kept on her son's chest, begging him to return. Her tears burned her throat, but her hands did not falter. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Again, again. She refused to lose another life. The machine arrived. She tore open Arthur's shirt with no hesitation. Gasps filled the room as they saw the cleaner's hands on their god, but Helena's face was carved in stone. She placed the pads, pressed the button, and delivered the shock. His body jolted, lifted, then fell. Silence. She resumed compressions. Her arms ached, but she pressed harder. She whispered, almost to herself, "Not this time. Not this one." Another shock, another jolt, and then a cough, a ragged breath. Arthur's chest rose. His pulse returned, weak but present. His eyes opened, confused, dazed, alive. The room exploded in disbelief. Voices rose, some in awe, some in shame. They looked at Helena now, but not as invisible, not as the cleaner. They looked at her as if a ghost had taken human shape and forced them to remember that even the lowliest hands could carry the power of life. Arthur's gaze found hers. For the first time, his eyes didn't pass through her. They stopped, locked, trembling with something he had never felt toward her before: dependence. He had been at the edge of death, and this woman had dragged him back. Later, when the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics confirmed what Helena had done. She had saved him. If not for her, he would have been gone. But the story did not end there. When Arthur returned to consciousness fully, when the noise of the party faded into whispers, he demanded to know who she was. The executives stuttered, embarrassed, muttering the cleaner as if it were an insult. But Helena stood straight, her face calm, her voice even. "I am Helena," she said. "I was a nurse before I became what you see now." Arthur blinked, his lips pale, his voice weak. Why are you here then, cleaning floors?" And Helena's silence filled the room with weight. Then she spoke, each word dipped in the pain of years. "Because when my son needed the system, it turned its back. Because doors that opened for men like you were shut in my face. I lost him. And when I lost him, I lost the will to fight, so I became invisible. That's what happens when the world decides your grief is worthless." Her voice trembled, but did not break. The executives looked at the floor, ashamed, unable to meet her eyes. Arthur's breath caught. He tried to speak, but no words came. For the first time, the man of power, the man of arrogance, had nothing to say. And in that silence, Helena felt the ghost of her son beside her. She had not saved him, but she had saved another. And maybe, just maybe, that meant her fire was not fully dead. But what she did not yet know was that this night would not simply be about saving a man's life. It would be about exposing the rot inside the system, and about a choice that would shake both their worlds. Because survival was only the beginning, the real test was yet to come. Arthur insisted she meet him the next day, in his office, alone. And Helena, though reluctant, agreed. She knew this was not just about gratitude. He wanted to understand. He wanted answers. But she had her own demands, her own truth. The woman they once ignored was about to confront the empire they built. And this time, she would not remain invisible. The next morning, Helena's reflection stared back at her from the small cracked mirror in her one-room apartment. Her uniform, still smelling faintly of chemicals, hung on the hook. For years, she had worn it like a mask, a reminder of her place in the world. But now the fabric seemed thinner, almost transparent, as if the night before had burned holes through the illusion. She had saved the life of a man who thought himself untouchable, and he had summoned her. Helena walked to the tower slowly, her shoes carrying her past streets that had long ignored her existence. Vendors shouted, buses roared, and the city pulsed with the same indifference that had devoured her son. Yet inside her chest, a rhythm had changed. It was not joy. It was not pride. It was something sharper, a flame that refused to die, even if it had to burn her from within. When she entered the lobby, whispers spread like fire. Everyone had heard. The cleaner who had saved the CEO. Her eyes followed her, some filled with curiosity, some with discomfort. She felt the weight of their gaze, but she did not bow her head. Not this time. Arthur Legrand's office was on the top floor, behind glass walls that overlooked the city as if he owned it. Helena had never stepped inside. The secretary's eyes widened when Helena gave her name, but she pressed the intercom. Moments later, the door opened. Arthur sat behind the massive desk, pale from his ordeal but alive. His eyes, once sharp with arrogance, now carried something softer. Fragility, perhaps, or fear of the void he had glimpsed. "Sit," he said, his voice weaker than she remembered. Helena remained standing. "I prefer to stay." A silence stretched between them. He studied her, as if trying to reconcile the image of the woman before him with the hands that had dragged him from death. "You saved me," he finally said. "You did what none of them could. Why did you—" He stopped, words tangled. "Why are you here, Helena? Why are you cleaning floors when you are more?" Her laugh was bitter, sharp as broken glass. "Because life does not care about what you are. It cares about what you are allowed to be. And for people like me, doors close faster than they open." Arthur's gaze faltered. "Tell me." And so she did. She told him about her son, about the hospital, about the signatures that took too long, the indifference carved into the faces of men in white coats, the silence that answered her cries. She told him how she buried her boy with hands that still smelled of antiseptic, how she burned her uniform and swore never again to serve a system that measured lives by wealth. Her words filled the room with a weight heavier than glass or steel. Arthur leaned back, his fingers trembling. For once, he did not interrupt. He listened. And when she finished, his eyes glistened with something that looked almost like shame. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You never cared to know," Helena replied, her voice steady. "People like you don't see us. We are the ones who scrub your floors, serve your drinks, bury our children in silence. You build empires on our invisibility." Arthur closed his eyes. The memory of collapsing, of his chest burning, of the darkness swallowing him, returned like a phantom. And then the image of Helena's hands pressing life back into him. He shivered. "I owe you everything," he said. Helena shook her head. You owe me nothing. You owe the world something. You owe every invisible person you have stepped over. If you want to repay, then use your power differently. Change what you can. Because gratitude without action is just another form of arrogance. Her words pierced him deeper than the defibrillator's shock. He had spent his life believing power was control, wealth, dominance. But here was a woman stripped of all those things, commanding him with nothing but truth. Arthur rose slowly, as if the air itself resisted him. You are right, he admitted. And I don't know how to begin, but I will. He paused. With you? Helena's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I want you to work with me, not as a cleaner, not invisible, as someone who can help me see what I refuse to see. You have knowledge, experience, fire. I need that fire. She almost laughed again, but the sound died in her throat. A part of her longed to reject him, to spit his offer back at him, to remind him that her son had died because of men like him. But another part, the part that still carried the memory of compressions, of a pulse returning, knew that her silence would change nothing. I don't want your charity, she said. This isn't charity, Arthur insisted. This is survival. Mine, and maybe the company's. Maybe more. Helena stared at him for a long time. She thought of her son, of his laughter, of the way his small hand once clung to hers. She thought of all the mothers who still cried in sterile hallways, waiting for doors to open. Perhaps this was her chance to force one open. I'll do it, she said at last. But only if you agree to one condition. Arthur straightened. Name it. That we change this place? That we build something that does not crush the ones at the bottom. That every decision you make, every policy you sign, you remember the floor cleaner who saved your life. You remember the son she lost. And you make sure fewer lives are lost to arrogance. Arthur's throat tightened. He nodded, agreed. And so began an unlikely alliance. Weeks turned into months. Helena moved from the night shifts of silence into meetings filled with voices that once dismissed her. At first, they scoffed, whispering behind closed doors. A cleaner advising the CEO? Absurd. But Arthur silenced them with a glance, his word now carrying the weight of his near-death humility. Helena spoke rarely, but when she did, the room listened. She exposed the blind spots, the cruelty hidden in fine print, the voices they ignored. She became the mirror they could not look away from, and slowly the empire shifted. Policies changed, healthcare benefits extended, workers heard. The invisible became visible. But transformation does not come without resistance. Whispers grew into threats. Some board members plotted in the shadows, angry that their power was being diluted. One night, Helena returned home to find her door scratched, a warning scrawled in red, "Stay in your place." Fear curled in her stomach, but she did not bend. She had already lost everything once. What more could they take? Arthur, too, felt the weight. He received anonymous letters, threats of sabotage. His health wavered, his nights restless. Yet whenever he faltered, he remembered the darkness, the breath that had nearly left him, and Helena's voice pulling him back. And he pressed on. Their bond deepened, not friendship, not love. Something raw, forged in survival, a recognition that their fates had been tied by death's hand and now carried by the fire of change. But the storm broke one evening during a board meeting. The conspirators struck, presenting documents, false accusations, demanding Arthur's resignation. They painted Helena as a manipulator, a woman exploiting his weakness. The room filled with venom, eyes burning with hatred. Arthur's chest tightened, the memory of pain returning. For a moment, he seemed about to collapse again, but Helena stood. Her voice, calm yet thunderous, cut through the chaos. You call me manipulator, she said. but I am nothing more than the reflection you fear. I did not take his power. I gave him back his life. And with it, he chose to see what you refuse to see. If that threatens you, then perhaps you should ask why." The room fell silent. Arthur rose beside her, trembling but firm. "She saved me," he said, his voice echoing. "Not just my body, my soul. And if this company cannot stand with her, then it cannot stand with me. I would rather burn it down than return to blindness." The conspirators recoiled, defeated not by force, but by conviction. One by one, their voices withered. When the meeting ended, Arthur leaned on Helena, his body frail. "You gave me strength," he murmured. Helena's eyes softened, though her heart remained heavy. "I gave you truth. Strength you had to find yourself." The weeks that followed were quieter. The threats faded, though never fully vanished. Change continued, slower but steady. Helena knew battles would always come, that power resists transformation, like flesh resists fire. But she no longer felt invisible. She carried her son's memory like a banner, a reminder that grief can be turned into blade. Years later, when Arthur finally stepped down, he did so with Helena at his side. The company had transformed, not perfect, never pure, but human in ways it had never been. And Helena, though older, though her hands still bore the scars of bleach and loss, walked with her head high. On her last day in the tower, she paused in the empty hallway. The same marble floor she once scrubbed reflected her faint silhouette. She placed the broom against the wall one final time, not as surrender, but as a relic of the ghost she had once been. She whispered to no one and to everyone, "I was invisible, but I will never be invisible again." And as she stepped into the fading light, her son's memory walked beside her, not in silence, but in fire. Because some ghosts do not haunt to terrify. They haunt to remind the living that survival is not enough, that justice is born in the hands of those who refuse to stay unseen. And Helena, the cleaner, the nurse, the mother, the ghost that refused to vanish, left behind a legacy that outlived both power and grief. A legacy whispered in every corner where the invisible once stood. We are here, and we will not be forgotten.